We welcome you here. This is really a special day for us. It's the confluence of several things. It's the end of the corner, yay. We have our first graduating class. We're really excited about that. So this afternoon we'll be having a graduation ceremony. And we'll be honored to have Governor Bill Ritter be our commencement speaker. He was here when we kicked it off, and he's been a big supporter of our school, so we're excited for that. So to get us started, I'm going to ask, incidentally, I'm Glenn Wilson. I'm the academic dean here. So to start it off, I'm going to ask the board to introduce themselves and tell us something new and exciting that's happening in the renewable and clean energy field. And we're going to start out with the rose between the thorns, Janelle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle Kelman. I'm actually an environmental attorney at a California utility, Pacific Gas and Electric. I've been practicing law for over 14 years. I work primarily on renewables in the area of wind and solar. One of the things I'm actually most excited about, my car ride folks heard all about, is geothermal. This morning, or maybe it was yesterday, I read an article about Ball State University out of Indiana that has decided to replace 4 coal-fired boilers with underground geothermal energy. And that's actually really exciting, super innovative. They're estimating something like a $2 million annual savings for the facility. And so I think it's a really wonderful, exciting move in the right direction. So that's something I think everyone should know about. And thanks for letting me go first.
All right, you want me to go next, huh? I'm Craig Matazinski. I am the Chief Executive at Gradient Resources, which is in fact a geothermal company, so you can probably gauge from that exactly who is riding in the car together. I've been involved in utilities, energy for, I guess, 30 years now. I've done everything from nuclear, coal, gas, to wind, solar, now geothermal. It's just amazing the number of opportunities that exist out there. I think the thing that as you look forward to where opportunities lie, the solar industry is going to go great guns the next few years because their incentives go out through 2015, and that represents an opportunity for folks to look at that field as a growth opportunity. And once we get the political situation in the U.S. here settled at the end of the year, I look forward to working to advance renewables with the new Congress and actually implementing some real tax reform that is going to allow the industries here to develop into a cost position where we're competitive with oil, gas, and coal, as opposed to a situation where you just have incentives that allow projects to get done currently. So, there's a lot of opportunity ahead, a lot of good things to look forward to. It's going to take some time to wash out, but in the near term, there's a lot of opportunities that still exist out there.
Good morning. My name is Gadi Darkazali, and I'm going to start with the beginning and the end, because if I tell you all my life, it is going to be boring. The thing I'm proud of is, like with most students, is when I was doing my PhD, I worked on the first utility-independent solar house, which was a combination of wind and solar energy and insulation technology at that time. And the reason I'm telling you about it, because I'm proud that first windmill is now at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. So we're all proud. A lot of people work on these things, so it's not one person. But I was like one of the first PhDs in that arena. And I learned a lot today on the ride here about geothermal energy. I'm really glad, and which shows that no matter how old you are, you really keep learning about things. I knew a lot about it, but not in detail, and I'm really grateful for the ride here. And the reason I said I'll talk about the end also, because now I am a president of a college in Massachusetts, and I actually sit in President Coolidge's office, summer office. So president sitting in the president's office is really neat, What is interesting now that I am back in education is when I talk to other administrators and presidents of colleges and universities, I noticed that they're getting into the renewable energy, and many of our schools and colleges on the North Shore of Massachusetts, they're putting wind generators to reduce their costs and also to show their students that this is the way to go for the future. So, and I think that between those two milestones, there are a lot of things that I could help you with if you have any question or anything. So, thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Colin Coyne, and my firm is primarily a strategy firm, so they wouldn't even let me ride in the car with them. The nature of our work is we tend to look at larger, bigger systemic things, strategies, global trends, and that type of thing. And I won't bore you with all the details here, but we are very excited about the global trends that we see happening that favor renewable energy, not by choice, but by necessity. Last November, the global population crossed 7 billion for the first time, on the way to 9 billion by 2050. By 2030, China will no longer be the most populous country in the world. It'll be India, and they'll both be sitting about 1.4 billion, which means between now and 2030, India alone will add the equivalent of one United States. You add on top of that, it's where the population growth is going, which is in the developing countries, not the developed countries, which means it's more people, each consuming more. All that goes to say that it is not going to be an option to look at renewable energy or anything because everybody I've polled 100%, and if you all want to disagree, you'd be the first. You simply ask, are the number of resources going up or the number of resources going down? More people competing for less, and suddenly business is on board and seeing this as a resource allocation issue. We add on top of that some issues related to the debt, what the true cost of a gallon of gasoline is. We think it's $3 or $4, and it's closer to anywhere between 25 and the sky. We do subsidize our energy costs with our military expenditures, and while the breakout of the Arab Spring is extraordinary on a human level, democracy is a sloppy process. And that sloppy process, as we're seeing this week alone in Egypt, means uncertainty in global market pricing. When you put all that stuff together, you start seeing the ability to control your price for the future as being an integral part of business strategy. And I think that, more than anything else, business and speaking the language of business to business is what is important, because business at the end of the day is who controls the allocation of resources on the planet. And this is why they don't let me ride in the car, because I'm just boring. But long-winded way of saying everything that these folks who are truly professionals have to say, I don't think it's because that's their industry. I think it's because these are the smart people who are just like our graduates at Ecotech, who are in the place of where the future is going to be. I saw a great quote by a French philosopher, a poet, that the problem today is that the future isn't what it used to be. And these guys are the ones who are positioning themselves for what the future is going to be, not what the future has been.
Hi, my name is Abbas Qasimi. I'm professor in chemical engineering and director of Institute for Energy and Environment. I've been involved with the renewable energy and natural resource issues for 25 plus years. I think I got involved with it when the price of oil was $10 a barrel. And when I talked about it, people thought I was smoking something. To a great extent, where I see we are going as a nation, and I think that's the question Glenn asked in terms of new and evolving thing, is that we've got to continue to come up with a cross-disciplinary approach to energy solutions. We can't have technology in itself be the answer, because I think, as Craig talked about, policymakers don't understand technology. You really have to have this breadth of ideas on the technology side, on the legal side, on the business side, and then together go to those that can make it happen and have those take it in and go to the next phase. And that's where you come in. You all will take these concepts that are being promoted at this level today, or what's going to be promoted for 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, as Colin talked about, and you will put it into application. That's what the exciting future is that I see coming down.
Good morning. My name is Tim Callahan. I'm a partner at the law firm of Paul Hastings. I'm based in Chicago. My practice is primarily representing, it could be owners, developers, lenders in infrastructure projects. It could be buying and selling coal plants, gas plants, wind, solar, biomass, financing them, or again, the development functions. I think as Craig mentioned, and Abbas alluded to a second ago, I think what I'm most looking forward to is some certainty in the energy sector as far as energy policy, which I think we most of us don't expect to see much until the new election cycles through. But we need to have some sort of policy that applies not just to wind and to solar, but also coal, nuclear. So I'm very hopeful that with this new election, we will actually put through some policies that will spark the industry. I think as Craig mentioned, wind is, it's kind of on a little bit of a downtrend on development, but the solar, I think, is pretty exciting, and I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of activity for the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much. So why don't we open the floor up? Sue and I will just hand you the microphone if you have a question. So who wants to start it off? One of our great students.
My name's Les Crosby, and I'm just starting my 8th term. I'm a wind technology student. And one of the things we've seen happen over the last 18 months, actually a little longer than that, is the price of natural gas has really come down. And it seems to have changed sort of the mentality about renewables, at least in the short term. What are your thoughts on natural gas going from $9 or $10 down to $2.15 or $2.20, and how that impacts renewables across the board in both wind, solar, and geothermal?
Well, I think that really goes back to what we were alluding to as far as having a national policy. I think everyone here will agree that with natural gas prices going down, utilities are less apt to purchase renewable energy. They can produce power through natural gas much cheaper. If we have a national program that, if you had a national RPS or some sort of national mandate, that would engender more activity on the renewable side. And so again, I look back to, when the election cycle is over, hopefully the politicians will say, hey, we need to look at energy globally, or all technologies, coal, nuclear, renewables, and try to engender activity in all those sectors.
I think we have to be careful also that we don't put too much faith in just the political system by itself, because I think we also have to look at, and the natural gas thing is relevant to this, we have to start seeing these issues as non-political issues. These aren't liberal, Democrat, Republican, conservative, but that's how it is being played and continuing to be played in Congress. I think the natural gas is a wonderful Band-Aid. I think at the end of the day, it's a non-renewable resource. And so my question has been the case all along. We get asked all the time, do you have a problem with somebody using non-renewable things? And I really don't if it's an investment in a renewable future, because it's like spending from your savings account to fund your day-to-day household expenses. It's going to run out eventually. A lot of the price drop, I think there's a lot of hope in the fracking and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, whether you believe in fracking, whether you believe in the technologies, et cetera, it's a non-renewable. It's a great Band-Aid to take the pressure off at a time when the economy needs it. But I don't think we want to be too married to that as the sole solution, or all we're doing is kicking the can down the road to the next generation. So I think there has to be a good balance of the two. It gives us great time to depoliticize the discussion, because some of the pricing pressure may come down a little bit, but we better keep really having a non-political discussion about the realities that is simply further down the road.
To give a kind of a complementary perspective on it, I see the drop in natural gas as a tremendous opportunity, right? So it's an opportunity to replace, to retool the trucking fleet, retool the car fleet, and replace oil-based gasoline with natural gas engines. Now that'll have an effect, of course, of lifting the price of natural gas, because you have higher demand, which will ultimately help the renewable situation to a degree. It'll also have the effect of lowering the $25 per gallon of gasoline that we pay because of all the support for the military and the other programs that we have out there that really are unrecognized in the cost of gasoline. So that's kind of the first thing. But the other thing that low gas price does is it kind of forces the renewable technologies to learn how to compete better. And over the long run, that's what needs to happen. See, the problem with subsidies from the government, problem with government subsidies from an industry perspective, is that it forces you, it prevents you, it almost discourages you from innovating and reducing the cost of your technology. One of the things that I'm involved in, for example, is a company called Shearwind up in Minneapolis. And what we are doing is trying to develop a new wind turbine that we've specifically targeted to try and beat the price of natural gas, to generate with wind energy from a low wind resource at a mid-30s to mid-40s dollars per megawatt hour price. Okay, it uses a cold turbine technology and some other innovations that allow you to generate more energy at low wind speeds. Those are the type of innovations that get looked at when you have this need that is created by a perturbation in the market like what you're seeing now that isn't recognized with peer government incentives and things like that. So I think you have to look at it both ways. Is it a negative in the near term? Possibly, excuse me. Negative in the near term? Possibly. But is it an opportunity in the long term? Absolutely. And that's the view that you have to take.
I was also I think it's also very geographic. I practice in California, but I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I can just tell you that working for a California utility where environmental stewardship is at the top of our corporate pyramid, we wouldn't touch it. We would really, the pricing is nice, but we've backed away from wind projects for environmental issues. And knowing this is happening in my parents' backyard in Pennsylvania and seeing what's happening in some of the groundwater tables, I think it's inevitable that it's becoming politicized. And so I think it's going to have different impacts across the country depending on where you are. But I definitely think it's, like Colin said, more of a Band-Aid. I don't see it as any type of long-term solution.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Rob Parker, also an 8th term student. Me and Les went to the OEA conference in Atlanta, and to get a different perspective from just being at school to go see that, and we were blown away on just the pure size of everything. 2 buildings as big as this building, just full of wind stuff. So you're like, the wind's going to happen. There was no doubt on that. But are companies in the States, are there specific wind companies looking to go outside the States to, because they were all here. They were all, there was Korean companies, Chinese companies, everybody else to build here, but the political situation has to allow. But from a pure business standpoint, do we have any companies that are going, hey, we can also go to India and whatnot and build turbines there and still make money? Do you know anything to that aspect?
Well, GE, of course, is a U.S.-based company, and they're one of the biggest suppliers of wind turbines, in the world. I think that when you look at the innovation that takes place, I think it's going to come from smaller companies because generally it does. The paradigm that I see with innovation is that an entrepreneur develops it, creates a company that perfects it, and GE ultimately ends up commercializing it, and that's what GE does. And Siemens is a little bit different. They do a lot of innovation in-house. So from a technology standpoint, I think it's going to be new U.S. technologies that probably lead the charge overseas and get adopted overseas, and maybe some of those technologies come back as some of the overseas companies take the technology and then manufacture and bring it back to the States. There's a number of companies that are already doing a lot of business, though, in the wind area overseas. And if you consider Canada, places like Canada overseas, Mexico, places like that are developers that actually go out and make the investment in the wind farms and things like that. And Canada is a huge market right now, and they have a huge need. There's a lot of wind going in. They got a huge need for for people up there for new technology. And we've got companies in the U.S. that regularly go over to Europe to make the investment at places like that. So those are probably more likely where you're going to see U.S. companies participating in the wind side in the overseas market. And that actually probably applies to solar as well. And I know in my field, geothermal as well, you have a number of companies that are based in the U.S. that are looking to deploy capital and provide opportunities overseas for those technologies.
In Spain, too, Iberdrola is a huge wind developer, but it's interesting they actually tend to come over here to do their projects, maybe because of the tax incentives. But and I'm not quite sure what your question ultimately was getting at, whether it was about opportunities or what. But I also always want to urge people to keep a balanced approach in terms of we're not really thinking globally from a renewable perspective if we're not thinking about the production chain, if we're not thinking about where things are taking place and how it's being done. It's not, in my opinion, okay to have low-cost solar in the United States at the expense of people in China because wastes haven't been taken care of. It's not okay to have better wind technology worldwide if we're just going to go into a less developed country and impact the habitat of the species there. So I think for renewables to really take ground and for people to really embrace it, it has to be more of a holistic shift. And I think that tends to be very difficult because a lot of the folks on the ground come from a more of a construction or development standpoint, and they bring that with them, and it's merging almost of two cultures. So it's just something to think about as you learn and express yourselves.
Yeah, maybe I can even provide a better example. We've got something closer to home. We've got a company in the area here named Boulder Wind Power. And what Boulder Wind Power has done is they've actually, originally their intent was to become a wind turbine developer, builder, constructor of wind turbines. But they've actually developed a new generator technology that is applicable to wind, both onshore and offshore. And they are perfecting this technology with the intent of exporting that technology not only to wind farms in the U.S. here, but overseas. I mean, that's where U.S. companies have an advantage in the innovation side of things, and then the commercializing it for export into foreign markets.
At the risk of taking a question completely nowhere you intended it to go, a lot of this does touch on just a general import-export of labor and labor cost models and that type of thing. And clearly the U.S. is in a position of needing the higher profit margin, shorter run type of investments. And the lower cost labor environments overseas, you have an advantage there. But as their middle class rises, then they become less cost competitive. I think the more intriguing thing to me, we just touched on it a little bit, on the notion of exporting bad environmental practices. The U.S. has a problem in that we have our existent infrastructure heavily embedded in non-renewable energy sources. You have these developing countries that are growing very rapidly that have to invest in new infrastructure, and they can make the choice, renewable or non-renewable. You would think that China, India, Brazil would invest in the non-renewable heavily because that will give them a permanent cost competitive advantage. So when you talk about global cost competitiveness, their ability to produce. I've been stunned, however, at the extent to which China and India continue to invest in coal energy and all these things. There is a chance that, and that's the big thing that scares me from a U.S. global competitive standpoint, is if these developing countries, remember China's economy we're about to become the second placed economy in the world in terms of gross. Per capita, we're still far and away number one. But if they start investing in a lower cost structure into perpetuity, we have a problem because we're already married to a non-renewable format. That's where it gets very, very interesting. So again, I'm sorry, we're probably straying way off what you intended as a question, but I think it's a great question because it touches on so many levels of, we can't see this as just a US or Denver or any type of thing. That thing about there are no more local consequences applies across the board. And I think you're right to look at it through that lens because it's not so simple as what's happening here. It's happening all over the world, but that's the exciting part, right? It's tremendous opportunity, tremendous open, and you'll hear us go back again and again and say, but a lot of it rests on the politics. And again, until we depoliticize it, until we see this as a dollars and cents issue, that's where I find myself, wanting to throw something at the television set is when the debate gets so off track because it's being painted with these brushes. It's so far beyond that now, it's not even funny. But that's where it will get taken, especially when you're talking about whose congressional district gets allocated the dollars for this or that.
May I just add one quick thing? And I think we're hitting on all the right chords on this issue. But we really cannot address the issue of technology development, technology implementation, and technology availability and all these subsets without the policy, regulatory. But then we can't look at it with the binocular of 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 5-year outlook. I think these are the kind of things that need to be looked at for a long period of time. I think Colin is hitting on the issue that it's global, but it's also long term. As the growth of population comes in, as the demand comes in, all of these will kind of force us to start to take a look at this in a package approach, that portfolio approach. So wind in itself, you may not have brand new technology sets that come into place, although Greg is talking about some perturbation of technologies that are be evolving, and if you look at it, there are a number of these that come out, and GE takes a capital position on them. But if they didn't happen, I wouldn't lose hope, because the reality is we have certain amount of consumption of energy, natural resources, and we have to fulfill those. And we may not be able to do it all with wind, but we will do it with that portfolio of alternative energy packages.
I guess, I'm not used to a microphone, so my mind went blank a little bit with that question when I started on there. When I was there was also one thing, you could see all these big companies, Microsoft, Sprint, and everybody was behind there, and that's why I was going a little bit more towards the business aspect, because I know the PTC was very important, and it was all over the place when we were there. But talking to like Goldwyn, I was talking to a gentleman there to go to the aspect of not having to transport stuff everywhere. He says, we're going to make money. He goes, but if the PTC comes through, we're going to build a plant here in the States and just start moving around there. So I guess that's a little bit more I was going also, was just the business aspect, which you guys did cover on there. But I did see that a lot, that businesses are behind it. But everybody I talked to for bigger companies, they all said the same, when the PTC happens. It's just the time frame as to when it goes. So right. I appreciate all the answers.
Follow-up answers? Yeah.
Can I add something to what he just said? That I was going to get into this area, but I said let's keep it technical. But I I was the president founder of GT Solar Technology, which is now a billion-dollar company. And we used to sell worldwide. And the problem so I want to touch on the marketing and sales, because it's not only technology. You have to be ahead in technology. However, the way we do business is different from how other countries do business. For a small company like the one you mentioned, if they are going to sell overseas, they have to put a bid bond, a performance bond, a guarantee that the system is going to work, money that they will have to pay if the warranty didn't work out. So if you add all these, that puts them out of the bidding contest. So somebody else from Europe or local will come and take that order. Bigger company could leverage their weight because they talk government to government, the government helps them. However, a small company that's startup, innovative, that they have a new idea, they're not going to be able to put all these bonds, and they don't even understand what the bid bond is. They don't even understand what the performance bond is and how much it is and who is going to get it. And all of these are irrevocable. So you upset somebody, you don't get that money, okay? So I think the government and the Commerce Department, they have to really, and the banks, the Ex-Im banks and the World Bank, they really have to put some effort into supporting renewable energy, same way they support oil and gas and other industries.
Good morning. My name is Fred Lindy. I'm a third-term student here. And I'm listening, and forgive me for my ignorance, like I said, third-term student. But is there an organized or organization that for renewables in lobbying or PACs or something like that in this country that as a group, because we see all the individual different types of renewable energy, that are they together in one group to make it happen in this country?
Like the Solar Energy Industry Association, it's SEIA, SEIA. There's OEA for wind. Yeah, I mean,
And there's ACOR as well, which is really, they focus on renewables generally, whereas OEA is wind specific and the solar industry is solar specific. And to be honest, I personally think it's better if you have organizations that approach it, the renewable package in its entirety, versus each of these associations individually, because they all seem to have a little bit different approach as to, well, we get back to the politics and the politicians, but OEA has been really focused on the PTC. That's all they talk about is the PTC, whereas some of the other organizations say, well, let's talk about mandates or national RPS or something that will engender development for all renewables. So there are organizations, some, again, are focused on their specific industry. I think ACOR, Craig, is probably the most
It's
broadest.
probably the broadest.
Yeah, I think it's probably the broadest.
ACORE. ACORE.
He wants to know the actual. Now help me out, because I can't. We all say ACOR. I don't remember what it's for. Association of something. I'm sure it starts with.
I think it's the American Council on Renewable Energy.
Is it?
No, I appreciate that.
Are you guys familiar with it? I'm not. Are you
there are
familiar with
many.
it?
There are many.
Yeah, I think I was looking for more of a combined effort from all of the renewables energy, especially when we talk about entrepreneurs and smaller companies, to help the industry as a whole versus going at it one at a time.
But that's not the way, unfortunately, for better or for worse, that's not the way it's been approached. It's been approached by technology. And then you can have like a corporate eco forum, deals with sustainability. You can have things like the Clean Tech Forum that tries to generate sort of white papers on that information. And so you can find some more umbrella organizations, but they're not lobbying the way OEA or SEIA tend to be.
Hi, Chris Gorey. I'm a program director here at Ecotech. One of the things I think we do here is, build this educated workforce, right, as part of the infrastructure to transition to this new energy economy. And I want to ask kind of an open-ended question, because I think about this a lot. How do we get there? What are the implications politically, socially, economically that are involved in getting from here to there? It's a huge question, I know, but I just wondered what y'all might think about that.
Do we have to the rest of the day? Or?
We can filibuster.
Who's next?
May I please? Chris, excellent question. I don't know whether I can tell you the exact answer on what there is, what there. We don't know what that is. We only know that we can't continue to sustain what we're doing at the level we're doing it and expect somebody else to pay for it, kicking the can down the road. So the best example for me in my programs as a director of a center has always been be adaptable, be agile, look ahead, and try to make minor course adjustments as you go forward. Because these global sense of activities that everybody is talking about will formulate what that is going to be. So independent of what we think, and we have lots of power in this country in terms of directing a certain level of programmatic effort and technology effort. But at the end of the day, the demand of the 7 billion plus individuals, which we are 300 million of, is going to formulate lots of these other areas that are going to come in. So adaptability and agility is the name of the game.
I think you're looking at a situation where you can't change the way people act until you change the way they think. And that's really what Ecotech is about, is trying to change the way people think and look at things differently. To me, that's what makes being on this board really exciting, because that's how you change the world. I think we also have to look at something. We spent a lot of time on the panel here talking about production, but we also have to look in our way of thinking towards consumption in general. If the rest of the world starts consuming at a rate per capita that the United States consumes per capita, it's a very, very serious issue. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm actually an optimist. My favorite prop in all the work I do is this right here. You know, I went to college back when the dinosaurs were still sort of roaming the planet, and that right there replaces virtually over half of my dorm room. So there is a way that we may be able to consume less, but we've got to get out of people thinking they need a new one every year too, because we're, again, still kicking the can down the road. But I think how we get there from here is we change the way people think. That's what Ecotech's about. That is what the students here seek to be about. That's what we aspire to be up here. But I think that's the answer. And that's, you know, a wonderful sounding set of words, but it's a lot more difficult to do. But it gets to echoes a lot of the comments on the panel, the political process and depoliticizing it and that type of thing. But until we change the way people start thinking, we can't change the way they act. So to back it up, to me, is the beginning of that end we're trying to get to.
Okay, Jim first, and then Derek, and then back to you.
Good morning, Jim Statwick. I'm an instructor here at Ecotech. So my question is, I'm not sure if it's strategy or tactics, but I would like you to just kind of expand on your philosophy a bit about how narrow or how broad our students should be at Ecotech. For example, we talked about a lot of different sources of energy other than renewables this morning. And when I think about energy, one of the big factors I think about is water. You hear terms like energy-water nexus. So I would guess I'd like a little bit of conversation on whether we need to bring other topics in more broadly or whether it's sufficient to have a narrow student graduate who focuses on renewables and it's not some of these other areas like water or other technologies. Thank you.
Being that I was a professor at one time, I think the best way to educate your students is to give them practical examples of life. Theory is very good, but theory only widens the horizon, but doesn't give you a solution. If you give them examples of what is surrounding them, what they could use the theory for, they can really be good students and good part of the society. So that's what my advice is. You know, so reach out, see the subject that you're teaching, whether it is transformers or regulators or whatever, in a bigger example, and how people use it, and how a little efficiency gives you a lot if you multiply it by 100,000 users rather than one user, and so on and so forth. So that's what my recommendation is.
Tim?
I guess I would analogize it to my practice. I think the broader, at least at this stage, possibly the better. I mean, if I look at my practice, in the 90s, I was spending a lot of time on coal projects. Then I started into natural gas projects. Then I moved into wind, and then I started doing solar, and now I think I'm probably going to go back to natural gas. There was a time where I started doing some nuclear. My point being, the technologies change, the industries change, there's ups and downs in the various industries. So I think if you have a knowledge base, let's say, you know, Ghazi was talking about transformers, that applies to all these sorts of projects. So I don't want to divert from the goal and the direction of Ecotech, but I think within the disciplines, to the extent you can broaden it out so that it's an application that applies to the various technologies, I think is favorable.
Go ahead.
No, Greg, go ahead.
I think, you know, the first thing that people have to realize is energy affects everything we do. It affects our standard of living. Okay, there's nothing that we, you know, that we do that isn't affected in some way by energy. So by definition, okay, it's a broad subject matter, right? If you look at the growth of the U.S. economy over time, the electric consumption, energy consumption has grown as a percentage of the growth in GDP. I mean, that is evidence enough that it touches everything we do, all right? The other thing I'll say is that the limitation that you place on yourself is as narrow as you want to make it, right? So if you view things as having a broad application, energy being related to water, water being related to environment, okay, then basically anything goes. And, and I can give you an example. Okay, so one of the things that I didn't touch on in my introduction, I've got a problem, okay, in that people come to me with ideas, and I will oftentimes put an investment into the idea. So over the years, I have invested in, still own a piece of a manufacturing company that's involved in the construction industry that makes components for the metal, prefabricated metal buildings. Software company that provides actually a service to her company, which I'm out of that business now. A wind turbine technology company, a packaging company, energy, businesses. I'm involved in a new software company that anyone here would at some point, as this venture grows, have the opportunity to work for, because what it does is energy management. So all sorts of devices that need to be installed and connected and managed in some way. All right? Well, how narrow is that? All right? We're talking with this particular company about irrigation. All right? But anything that, being able to effectively monitor soil moisture contents in soils and adjust the irrigation schedule for optimized crop production. But what you're learning here is applicable, okay, to that particular field. And is it energy? Yeah, because it takes pumping power to move the water out of the ground onto the fields. It's environmental, but it sure as heck isn't narrow. So I guess my encouragement would be to, open it up, broaden it out. There's no, there's nothing that is so focused that other things don't affect it. I mean, we live in a world where when I went through my engineering program, okay, you hardly talked to anybody in the business world. Hell, you hardly talked to anybody, and I'm a nuclear engineer, you didn't talk to anybody on the electrical engineering side, right? Well, engineering is a discipline where if you don't have some basis in all of the disciplines, you can hardly be an engineer today. Okay, energy is the same way. If you don't have a basis in water or HVAC or just about anything, you're going to suffer. So I wouldn't limit myself in any way.
I just wanted to. Excellent, thank you, Greg. I was going to hit on water, so I also wanted to add. Your management here, your administrative team here, and the folks from Virginia College and Education Corporation of America are really keenly aware of this breadth that needs to come in. So one of the things that we discuss diligently in our board meetings are these evolving programmatic ideas that would complement what exists and then be able to give the next generation of the students the emerging field of expertise and experience, whether it's water or energy management or this combination of interconnectivity between energy, water, environment, and food production and all those other things. And socializing. Yeah, and socializing, sustainability, everything. We're looking at all aspects of that. There's one other piece I have to say is, I think Ghazi said it well. You have the concept as an instructor in a classroom. You have some theory to talk about. But applicability of those theories can go in the breadth that Craig is talking about. So you take a principal concept and then start to using the example of where it applies, how it goes across the span of things. And I think that's where you have that agility, if you will, to be able to train the next generation to be able to go into those kind of fields.
Hi, I'm Derek Bruns. As of 4 o'clock today, I'll be a graduate of Ecotech Institute.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So one quick comment I want to say is just I want to thank the board and I want to thank the faculty of this school because I feel like I have received a broad-based education. We've been trained that it's not all renewable versus non-renewable. It's really about the overall portfolio and using our resources as wisely as possible and also, moving into the future as wisely as possible. So once again, thank you for that. The question I had is really regarding the role of government in pricing. Over the last couple of months, we've seen that the government levied some tariffs on incoming Chinese solar panels, and it even kind of caused a rift in the solar industry itself between manufacturers and installers. So what I'd like to know is, what do you think the role, if any, of government should be in pricing on renewable energy?
Yeah. I'll start because probably I sold all this equipment to the Chinese who are manufacturing. And I'll tell you a secret. Many people complain about pricing because of manpower or labor. And in the solar industry, and others on the panel might disagree with me, I really don't think that is a factor, because it is a semiconductor type manufacturing. And it is mostly automated and doesn't need a lot of human interaction with the equipment. I am against any regulation, whether it is internal or external or whatever, because you suffocate an industry that's starting. You don't want to do that. However, I really think we don't encourage our industry that much, because if we really look at pricing and costing of a project, let's say that you want to put a 100 kilowatt system, you have to look at the whole picture, not only the panel price. And this is what we are doing. People are looking at the panel price. They look at some advertisement on somewhere, and they say it is 50 cents a watt or whatever, and they want to save 2 cents. But they don't look at the labor and the transportation and the benefit and how well the module is designed. I mean, we know how good a module that is designed and manufactured in the United States versus a module that is manufactured in China, and which one is going to perform longer and which one is going to last forever, versus you have to change it in 10 years. So I really think we have to look at the whole picture rather than one little thing. Because if you're looking at I'm sure you looked at some cost analysis of systems, solar energy systems and wind systems, and the hardware represents the hardware meaning the panels, represents about 50% of the cost. So we really need to look at the whole thing.
The question of government involvement in business could be debated for centuries right here. But had an interesting thing happen about 2 months ago. We've always had a problem with the trade imbalance with China, and we get very upset with China because we're running a deficit. A couple months ago, we actually sent some folks over there to talk to them about the fact that it's reversed in certain categories. And this is where that first comment about just the numbers and the resource allocation comes into effect. China is withholding export of certain raw materials. High technology, when they suddenly go, well, we've got it, and this is where the technology is going, because they've got it and we don't. Or they've got plenty of it. So I think the answer is, government involvement is going to become more and more and more delicate as the resources become more scarce. However, I do think there has to be incentives to start up new innovation, but not to the point, as Craig mentioned earlier, where it makes you sloppy as a business person. I admit I'm much more of a free market person, but I do like incentives to go in the right direction versus downright subsidies. And when we start talking about internationally, again, as everybody's competing for these resources that are becoming more and more scarce, it becomes that much more delicate a game to play. It used to be the United States could walk around and say, let me tell you how it's going to be. The number of business meetings I've sat in Europe and in Asia where some American businessman literally uses the phrase, let me tell you how it's going to be. Well, we're no longer the big dog on the block. You've got, give or take change, $15 trillion deficit with 1.7, depending how you count certain things, of that held by China. Now, people say to me, well, do you think China's going to come in and do a run on the bank and cash it all in and bankrupt America? No. We're their number one trading partner. They're our number one trading partner, so they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, but it does make the negotiations a lot more interesting. So anytime the government does or doesn't get involved, I think we have to start seeing things on a global perspective. We can no longer just sort of do, what's right for America is right for the world. We are so past that. I'm not sure, though, we necessarily have 100% of Congress thinking that way just yet, which is the most diplomatic way I can say. I'm quite certain we don't have 100% of Congress thinking that way.
I also think it's it's important to look at the local level. I think there's a lot of opportunities with some local rebate programs and ensuring efficiency of certain systems. So as we start to equalize more in terms of the technology and things seem to be more along the same levels, it's all about putting together more efficient systems. I once worked for this company that took PDAs and refurbished them and then superimposed the sun paths over the sky to be able to tell you down to the minute of the day of the year how much shade you would get on a solar installation. And there's a lot of technology emerging around that. And that was important, and it still is important, because local governments and the city and the county level are creating rebates that have this analysis that oftentimes will say, well, how much shading will you get for the system? And then the rebate, which is of course a reverse incentive, is based on how much shading and the efficiency of the system. So there are some really interesting arguments against this at the sort of the more global level, but I think there's some really fascinating things to be done at the local level.
I also like to add one quick additional comment to my colleagues here. Government policies should be enabling us, not disabling us. When we start to look at what we've done in this country, whether it's our interstate highway system or whether it's our oil and gas production, they've all been subsidized because they were of national importance. Until such time we really get the message that there is no Santa Claus and it's going to wave water and energy from somewhere and come in, until such time we recognize that, I think we will not do this global approach to managing our energy and natural resources. Policymakers really need to understand that, and hopefully, as times get tougher, Congress can't sit on the sideline and debate and argue about more drilling, whether it's fracking approach or drilling off in Never Never Lands.
I want to turn around and actually ask you all a question, and I'm going to warn you, it's an unabashed plug for something. Has anybody heard of the Fish and Wildlife Service wind energy guidelines? Okay, I got one hand. So this is an unabashed plug for the paralegal program here, and here's why. The wind energy guidelines, recently issued by Fish and Wildlife Service, are telling wind developers nationwide how and when they can run wind turbines based on potential impacts to avian species and other natural resources. And the last couple of questions have had this implicit theme through them of policy and lobbying and a broader knowledge base. And I absolutely think you guys have an opportunity through all of the programs here, but most certainly, completely biased, I'm a lawyer, through the paralegal program to gain some of that knowledge. It's kind of like, I'm a cyclist, and you can't go out and climb that 10,000-foot pass if you haven't run your base miles, right? If you don't have that base to be able to really go a mile wide, or in that case, a mile high. So I definitely think there's some great programs here, but unabashed plug for the paralegal program for sure. So that next time I ask that question, I have more than one hand going up in the room.
John.
My name is John Newroth. Jimmy Marsh is here with me as well. I'm the Strategic Development Officer for Ecotech Technologies, and we're on the opposite side of production. We're focusing on efficiencies, and we're backed by GE Capital with a fund that they've created over the last 6 months of about $100 million to go in and retrofit. Rather than producing, we're looking at saving energy via just efficient lighting, HVAC improvements, that type of thing. So Colin touched on it. How do you balance that capital investment in really the Star Wars side of it compared with just going back and looking at how you consume today and then going back and putting the dollars back into the building rather than, again, with the production of, say, solar or wind?
Thank you so much. I'm going to take a step at this one first because I think we've been woefully inadequate in addressing the energy efficiency. When you look at it, we've changed some light bulbs and done some changes of windows and some HVAC efficiency. It's woefully inadequate. It's very little. When you start to look at a high-rise, as an example, in downtown Los Angeles or Houston or Phoenix or Denver, we got 30 stories. We pump water 30 stories up, and then we flush it all the way down. All the net loss, energy consumption, energy is just being wasted away. And it's being used as a potable water where we treat, we spend tons of energy to treat, and then we flush toilets with. That entire concept, whether it's in the consumer side or production, manufacturing, production side, farming side, any of these sectors, the concept needs to be rearranged. The thought process has to come into a global sense that those low-hanging fruits of light bulbs and HVACs, they are one first step, but we've got a long way to go in that energy efficiency picture.
As an example, the building that we're looking at down in Meridian, just the HVAC improvements alone can reduce electrical consumption by 40%. Just that alone of the entire building, which translates into an ROI of maybe combined, what is it, less than a year? So you go back to PG&E, I'm not sure what your rebate cycle is, but Excel, they will rebate on improvements that have an ROI of less than a year. So here we are, we're selling a product to this environment, and again, it's an important environment because it's their IT department. Sorry, they've got these crack units that are at capacity today, and they're looking at how to better make these existing systems more efficient so that they can actually reduce that capacity for the consumption that's there today. But it's how do you balance that? Everybody wants a solar panel on the roof. Well, the ROI on a solar panel might be 5, 6, 7 years.
Do you need a rebate if something's got a payback of 8/10 of a year?
Sweet as the pot.
Well, okay, but the question is, should you have your hand in someone's pocket for something that makes sense anyways?
No, but the customer demand. Yeah, and the utility has kind of set that cycle up. They've gone out and they've paid for so many things for so many years. They've got the customer base accustomed to that they want someone else to pay for.
Sure, I get that. Everybody wants someone else to pay for it, right? Okay. All right, but the fact of the matter is, and this is the problem with the way the incentives have been set up, is it's like crack cocaine. You become addicted to it, okay, and now you need it. And before you're going to take the next step, you need another hit. Right? Okay, that is exactly what has happened. And instead what we need is we need to have an incentive system that drives towards improving the overall economics of renewables. And believe me, I agree that that the megawatts you don't use is the cheapest one you're ever going to buy, right?
Yeah.
So it makes obvious sense. But we've got a messed up value system. I don't care.
Retrain them to
Well,
believe that their investment.
no, we got to take and make the sale on a different basis. The way we talked about incentives earlier. What's the ideal? For me, okay, the ideal is to get away from the PTC. Okay, to have government invest in some of the basic R&D that sets technologies up to be that identifies the technologies that could be successful. To turn it over to the commercial sector at that point, which was much better at commercializing the technologies, to allow them to pick the winners and losers, and then at the end of the day have a set of technologies that compete effectively so that you don't need government subsidies. Okay, now granted, you're always going to have forms of tax incentives, accelerated depreciation, things like that in order to encourage moving investment up in time. But if you've got a technology that makes sense, that can economically compete, as wind does, for example, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, okay, where it is windy, or in the Buffalo Ridge in Minnesota and Dakotas, why do you need an additional incentive? To line an investor's pocket? Isn't a 13% return enough? Why do you need a 23% return that doesn't have, on an investment that doesn't have, any substantial more risk? I mean,
but the follow-up to that, it's going in the wrong direction. So Southern California Edison now just announced a program where if the customer signs up for it, they will ultimately pay for the normal, everyday, yearly maintenance that should be going on their HVAC systems, cleaning coils, replacing filters, that normal, everyday maintenance, because they know that the economy has forced these business owners to cut back everywhere, and so they cut back on things that actually are of value every day. And cost more money.
You need to be real careful here, because I just can't resist taking a good crack analogy and running with it. The only thing worse is if you're the guy buying the crack and the guy next to you gets to use it. And that's the heart of your problem. When you talk about ROIs, we're talking about ROIs and numbers all day long, but as to whom? When you're talking in a commercial environment, the benefit in most commercial environments are triple net leases, right? Which means if I'm the landlord, for those of you who don't understand real estate, triple net lease means you pay me a base rent and then you pay your own utility bills and other expenses. That's a very simplified discussion. Who invests the capital in the energy improvements? It's not the tenant, it's the landlord. I invest the money.
We just got our first landlord to sign up because they finally see that there's a value there in selling their properties at a more...
There you go. But when you talk about retrofit for existing tenants, here's the problem. I invest the capital, the energy savings goes 100% to my tenants. And I've got a 5-year lease with 3 5-year options. I don't get any return on the investment. And landlords, you know, years ago, I've been in development for years, so I can say, you know, we're a dull lot. The answer is you go to the tenant and you say, if I could reduce your rent by $1, do you want me to do that? Every tenant will say, yes. But landlords either don't try at all because they say, I get nothing out of the deal, or they go to the landlord, the tenant, and say, hey, I'm going to do something that'll save you $2, but I'm going to take $1 from you. And as soon as people think something's being taken from them, even if it would have saved them $1, they act differently. So you either have to go over to some type of gross lease, modified gross lease, some way that gives the landlord a return on their investment to begin with. Because otherwise, I invest the money in the building. Now, long term, you're absolutely correct. Long term, any investment that reduces the total occupancy cost to my tenant means the tenant will likely stay with me longer. Because the cheapest tenant you can get is the one you already have. You don't have to release the space. So if you can reduce their occupancy costs, it makes them better. But where a lot of the debate has missed it, just to wrap it up, is ROI. We can talk ROIs all day long, but to whom? If it's, I spend the money and Abbas gets the benefit, I'm not so inclined. I'm a nice guy, but I'm not that nice.
So maybe take it away from the boring landlord stuff. So in my opinion, you guys are the meat and potatoes, right? And you're the meat and the potatoes because, not just because what Craig says is the cheapest megawatt you're going to use, but because you're really getting at the core issue, which is can we change people's behavior? Can we get them away from the George Lucas shiny, Android over there to really changing what they're doing right now? And I think that you can talk about ROI all day long and who's going to pay for it, but until you actually get people to address it differently and to incorporate it into their own way of being differently, you're going to have an uphill battle. And it's unfortunate because, even at a utility, we see efficiency as being a real positive effort, whether it's a smart meter program or actually just energy efficiency elements. So I just want to throw out, just share with you guys, some of you might know there's a new Facebook app out there that lets people within communities compare energy usage and uses peer pressure and social networking to show everybody how you're doing within your community. And it's actually proving to be very popular and quite effective. There's also a really wonderful startup out of New York City called Honest Buildings. And the premise there is that landlords and tenants will sign their buildings up to have a green rating and thereby drive market forces as people become more aware and care more. Now, obviously, you got to get people to care more to become more aware, right? And it's back and forth. But I do think there's something to it that you can throw numbers around all day, but if someone isn't behind it and doesn't understand that social shift, that it's not going to go anywhere.
That's true. As the final piece on our program is even with the ROI discussion, it's under 2 years or something that's palatable to the business owner. The way we've really been able to sell it is it's the idea that we're splitting the existing cash flow. We're already paying the utility $1,000 a month, whatever it is. The backing by GE Capital allows that bill to be split to debt service and to new rate of utility. So it really can be a cash flow neutral cycle for all business owners. People just in this economic environment don't want to do anything. It's that complete fear of commitment. And you talked about the upcoming election. I don't even believe that after the upcoming election it's going to cure any fear. So with that said, there's all kinds of opportunity out there, but you're still looking at how you convince that person.
How do you think you break that cycle in your industry? How do you get over that hump? What do you think?
It's peer pressure, really. It's getting exactly what she said. And so you've got a situation where their neighbor did it, so now they'll do it. but the first kid on the block to do
It's
it
gotta do, yeah.
is the toughest sale.
So let me go to a real life example, back to Colin's boring landlord scenario. Just the other day, we occupy, I don't know, probably 10 floors in an office building in downtown LA. It's probably a 50-story building. Just the other day, we were approached about our firm being the sponsor putting solar panels on the top of the roof of this building. And of course, the emails came to me saying, what do you think of this? And my initial reaction was, okay, who's paying for this? How do I benefit? And this be a fantastic thing to do, but somehow it's got to work out economically for the landlord and for the tenant. So I agree there has to be peer pressure, but I think ultimately the economics are going to drive these decisions. Now, if we ultimately decide to do this, we'd be the first, I think we'd be the first tenant in all of LA who would actually put solar panels on the top of a high-rise office building. And I think that would engender other companies doing the same sort of thing. So then the peer pressure thing would kick in, but I think pure economics are going to drive the decision initially.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the Johnson control model, too. The other issue is just straight up who has the upfront cash to do it in this tight economy. The Johnson Controls has made a business model out of, we'll supply the cash, we get 50% of your savings, and their imputed interest rate on the money they're giving you is huge. I mean, they make a packet, but they got the cash, the landlord doesn't. So they're financing ways to get around that issue.
And they control all sides of that transaction too. They
Yeah.
come in and they tell you what product you're going to use. They ultimately do the calculations on how much you did save, and so they're telling you how much you're ultimately paying for that solution.
Right. What I'm saying is the money is going to find some of the solutions, and I absolutely agree there has to be a social change of consumption reduction. But if the money doesn't make sense, the guy sitting there having to write the check, you know, the price elasticity of demand in green, price sensitivity in green is exceedingly elastic. If it costs a little more, demand drops off tremendously, which does underscore this issue. We have to have a greater social awareness and make it so that the purchase decision is more than just monetary, but at the end of the day, especially in a tight economy, if the money doesn't talk, do you want to go to your partners and say...
the price of the crack has got to be reasonable.
Right, but here's the weird thing. Here's the weird thing. I know we talk a lot about money, return on investment. I'm going to go back to the peer pressure. If everybody made decisions based on money, why on earth would people drive Hummers? Why on earth would you drive an Escalade? Why on earth would you drive an SUV where it's obviously so expensive to fill that tank? It's peer pressure. It's about how people define themselves in this society. And so I think it's very easy for people to say, oh, well, you know, it's my return on investment, my ROI, let me throw out 100 different acronyms at you and some numbers in a spreadsheet, or just to say, you know what, I don't feel peer pressured to do it. I don't have to.
So how do you, it's
All
valid.
right, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to moderate this because
Okay, so out of control.
this is a topic that obviously could be discussed for hours, and we don't have hours. So if the panel wouldn't mind, I'd like to go to the next question. John, are you okay?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Sorry, John.
All right.
Right here. My name is Martin Baird. I'll be graduating here in about 3.5 hours.
Congratulations.
Seventh term student. I have 2 comments and then a question. One is, I think breakthrough technology can change people's minds faster than business can. And one of the breakthrough technologies that I've become aware of is called blacklight power. And this man has invented a process to shrink hydrogen down to a lower ground state. And it releases 200 times more energy than is needed to split hydrogen from water. So this means we could keep the liquid infrastructure, but also transition to electric motors. The conversions available on his website are, let's see, 1,500 miles on a liter of water gone to an electric vehicle. Given that new information, what do you think about how electric vehicles are going to bring about the change in the whole renewable field?
As a chemical engineer, I'll tell you, the second law of thermodynamics always gets you. So
Yes.
I passed on, as a PhD in mechanical engineering who taught thermodynamics. I tell you, you're talking about nonsense.
But having said that, let me say, technology breakthrough is very, very vital and important. However, as we know it today, efficiency of 40–50% is the norm. Improving that efficiency beyond that, it's a challenge. And anytime we talk about a perpetual motion machine, by which you're splitting water and you're putting in X amount of energy and you're getting 2X out, I have a lot of Missouri in me and I always say, show me. I want to see it. But to a great extent, and I do tons of analysis on technologies, various technologies that are emerging, and serve a review on them. There are some good technologies out there, but they aren't quite there. So I don't know about this black light technology, but I would love to look at his webpage and do some analysis on it.
Okay, so you've hit on one of the keys when it comes to adopting new technologies, right? The question is, does it cause me to have to make a significant change in my lifestyle? The problem with electric vehicles as we have it now is that you can only go 75 or 100 miles. I guess some batteries now are better. You might get 150 before you have to recharge, and then how long does it take to recharge? Okay, we're used to this petroleum-based, this liquid-based system where I can fill up my Hummer, if you will. My F-350 in my case.
The working man's Hummer.
Right. Well, you know, the horse trailer and all the rest of that stuff. But anyways, but I can drive 350 or 400 miles and then spend 8 minutes, fill up with the tank of fuel, get in the vehicle and go again. So if there's a technology out there that allows you to, that is electric vehicles that allows you to do that, I think it's easily adoptable. I don't think that people care that they're burning petrol versus driving on electricity. But the key is that you're not impacting their, or perceived to be impacting their lifestyle. And that's the key.
One little response. I also believe in the second law of thermodynamics as a statistical law, not a physical law. Second, I would immediately discount this breakthrough if the creator of this technology was not the author of the grand unified theory of classical physics, which is why I believe in it.
I admire your passion, and I think really, as Martin Luther King said, if there is no dream, there is no reality, and I appreciate that. I also want you to recognize that from the standpoint that we look at these kind of technologies, if some of my colleagues on the board may remember this, there was a gentleman that came up with a cold fusion technology and claimed that he really understood the process. And in his laboratory, he most likely did. The problem we have is anything we do in the world of science has to be replicable somewhere else by someone else to achieve similar kind of results. And I think that's where we struggle with these kind of concepts. So I'm not washing it outright, but it sounds really difficult for me at this level.
We didn't get a chance to go to everybody, but we'll stick around and discuss things with you, other questions that you might have. So first of all, I want to thank the panel. They came from a long way. We always learn so much. Phil and I were just talking that in our business concepts, we're going to add the ever popular crack cocaine theory. So thank you for that. When recently, this week, Mike and I and a lot of our faculty and staff had a chance to hear our graduating seniors give their final speech. And in it, they were very inspirational. And they were appreciative, first of all, of the fact that their life was changed in this 2-year experience, not only in the education and the fact that there's so many great jobs awaiting them, but the fact that they were able to participate in something that was so good and so positive for our society. And they wanted me to personally thank you as a board for your tireless work. You were here from the beginning. They wanted us to thank the parent company, ECA, for this vision, for bringing it here. And so I would like to give you a final opportunity with this class that took such a leap of faith in the vision that you did and the way we executed as a school. Do you have any final thoughts you have for this very special class?
I'll start. I guess I kind of said it before. I mean, don't stop looking for opportunities. You know, take every chance you get. When you go home, you see something any evening, you know, pick it apart a little bit, see if it's an opportunity. When you look for job opportunities, don't ignore the smaller companies out there that are in the field that could really benefit from what you've learned here. You know, the opportunities will sometimes you'll find them in the least expected area, and that's you know, that's kind of the view you have to take.
I'll just follow up with that. Really urge you to see this as it's an entrepreneurial field. And as we talked about in the car this morning, something like geothermal may not be for the faint of heart, but it is an entrepreneurial field, and that gives you the opportunity to see old issues in a new way. And whether you approach it through something you're more familiar with on Facebook or social media, or whether you take a decades-old theorem and reconfigure it to make something new, you have the opportunity in life and in business to go a mile deep or a mile wide. And I actually think that this is an area where you should just try to gather as much information as you possibly can about as many issues. And remember, take the blinders off, because you might miss something if you're living in a vacuum.
Incremental,
please.
No, go ahead.
As Craig was making his comments, I couldn't help but think of my oldest son, who's graduating from high school and going off to college. And he has said, you know, I want to be an investment banker, Dad. And I say, well, what is that? I don't know, you invest in bank. And he hears the term, he hears they make money, so he wants to be an investment banker. And I stopped him and made comments similar to what Craig said. I said, you know, markets change, jobs change, who knows what's out there? Don't put blinders on and just say, this is what I want to do. And I would echo the same thing to you guys. Don't put blinders on. You know, there's a vast wealth of opportunity, positions, technologies are going to change, fields are going to change. Just keep an open mind, and you'll certainly find something you enjoy.
Not surprisingly, a very similar comment. Incremental thinking leads to incremental solutions. The time is right for quantum leap thinking. It's wide open out there, and the world cries for it. Never quit learning, never quit educating yourselves, and that's where I have such tremendous respect for everyone in this room, because every one of you has made a commitment to continue to educate yourself. I think to everyone's comments, that's exactly it. Keep doing it, keep learning process going, because the world is changing faster than we can keep pace with. You're celebrating, they call it commencement for a reason, because you're commencing on a new journey. You're not ending this. Keep re-educating yourself, and you have my utmost respect, because you've made the commitment. You've earned the right to be here at 4 o'clock today, but don't stop here.
Well, I mean, I'm not able to say more than they said, other than it is your life. You really do what you want with it, and you started at the right foot. You know, you're doing something for yourself. You're doing something for the surrounding environment. And that should make you proud enough. I mean, not only doing something for yourself, but you're causing good to the community and to an environment. So I think that should be a reward enough. But don't stop. Please don't stop. This is the beginning, commencement.
I think I've met with the graduating seniors, and I've made that comment to them before. It is a journey. It's a beginning, and don't look at it as an end. I think my colleagues talked about it. But you also keep in mind that you are representing us, you're representing Ecotech, you're representing ECA, you represent everything that is good about this vision that we've had since the beginning, and the implementation that ECA took on which actually became practice here with Ecotech. So you represent us, your boots on the ground. Continue to do everything that we've talked about, but continue to evolve, pass the message forward. It is really, truly the fight for civilization. It is not about the price of gas being at $3 a million cubic feet, or it's not about the price of oil being $15 a gallon or $30 a gallon. It's about survival. It's about what we do. This is all big, big. So every time you're busy with the mundane stuff that you will be busy with, step back and look and say, I am looking for that global set of accomplishments, because that's where you're going.
Okay, thank you very much. We'd ask everyone to stick around if you can. And just one final cute little story. Renee was showing me her kids' forms here, and one of them listed their dream college, not Harvard, Ecotech. So thank you very much.